There was a time during the 7th generation of consoles that Ubisoft was on top of the world. With giant franchises like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry dominating the sales charts, there was a stretch there where it seemed like Ubisoft couldn't miss. But in more recent years, Ubisoft as a company seems to have nosedived. Their games are not being received nearly as well, with consumers growing tired of their standardized formula. And what's even more concerning is that Ubisoft games are now starting to struggle in the sales department also. Ubisoft recently dropped a slew of negative press announcements, including the declining player base of their floundering live service game XDefiant, the softer than expected sales for the recently released Star Wars Outlaws, and the delay of the upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadows. With Ubisoft's stock plummeting to a decade low, there is a genuine worry for the future of the company. In today's video, we are going to talk about what exactly is happening with Ubisoft and how we got here. I think the best place to start this story is going back to 2007 when the first Assassin's Creed game was released. Ubisoft had existed for many years before this, creating some big games and becoming a very notable publisher. But Assassin's Creed was their biggest hit and began the transformation into the company we know today. It's easy to forget how beloved and well regarded the Assassin's Creed franchise was in its infancy. Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 were seen as revolutionary games, specifically with their style of open world. While these open worlds wouldn't be considered very big or expansive by today's standards, they were very impressive for the time. Most of the open world exploration centered around moving from point A to point B, tracking specific markers on the map, and looking for collectibles scattered throughout the world. At the time, this formula resonated with gamers in a big way, and after the success of Assassin's Creed, it became Ubisoft's go-to design philosophy. If you're playing a game and you're seeing a lot of towers or tower-like structures that players climb to reveal new parts of the world, or you're running into a ton of enemy camps to fight and clear out, or there's hundreds of different icons littering the map, you are probably playing a Ubisoft open world game, or a game inspired by it. For about a decade following the release of Assassin's Creed, this was the most common style of open world game to see. Ubisoft was clearly very proud of their creation, and they were not scared to show it. Ubisoft released yearly Assassin's Creed games for 11 years straight, all featuring the same format. Meanwhile, their other franchises started to do the same, with Far Cry, Watch Dogs, and some Tom Clancy games featuring the same characteristics. It started to reach a point where some players had begun voicing their displeasure with such a large number of games releasing that felt so similar. But for all the hate Ubisoft games got, they always seemed to review decently well, and for the most part sold exceptionally. What this led to was a clear mentality from Ubisoft that they could do no wrong, and a belief that if they stuck to their guns, everything would work out as their core audience would always support them. This held true for the decade following the launch of Assassin's Creed and the Ubisoft formula. But then, something changed. The way people viewed open world game design was flipped on its head in 2017 with the release of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. And then that brilliance was reaffirmed in 2022 with the release of Elden Ring. These games differed from the Ubisoft formula, and instead created a world that truly felt open. There weren't markers everywhere telling you where to go, or waypoints on the map noting important landmarks. Instead, the developers let you discover these things for yourself. There really is nothing quite like stumbling upon a new Elden Ring boss or Zelda dungeon when you aren't expecting it. It creates a sense of adventure that you just can't quite get from the Ubisoft style. Regardless of how you may personally feel about the Ubisoft style, what can't be denied is that the conversation and expectations surrounding open world games drastically changed following the release of Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring. A lot of gamers found it difficult to go back to the old ways of open world gaming, and suddenly the idea of a Ubisoft open world game became more of an insult rather than a descriptor. So, did Ubisoft see this shift in gaming culture as a sign they needed to innovate? No, not at all. If anything, they doubled down. Assassin's Creed games became more bloated than ever, Far Cry games continued to feel exactly the same as they did 10 years ago, and even when Ubisoft puts out something seemingly unique, those who play it will quickly see the cycle repeat. It doesn't matter if it's an Assassin's Creed game, an Avatar game, a Star Wars game, or a damn sports simulation game, all of it continues to be the exact same. But the only difference is, instead of being well received and selling well, review scores are continuing to decrease while sales decline. Don't get it twisted though, there are a lot of other issues plaguing Ubisoft beyond just their outdated design philosophy. The first is a clear lack of leadership. Whether it's project managers or team leads or the CEO Yves Guillemot himself, Ubisoft appears to be a company that is in constant turmoil. Their projects never seem to go according to plan, and you can see that in their declining quality. No game represents this better than Skull and Bones, which released earlier this year. Back in 2013, Ubisoft released Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which is still to this day my personal favorite entry in the series. The game featured ship combat combat that players absolutely love, and this led many to say, hey, I would play a whole game that was just this ship combat. And so, development on what would become Skull and Bones began. But somehow, the game that was just supposed to be AC-4 ship combat as a full game became a decade-long nightmare. Skull and Bones was constantly delayed, seemingly missing every target and deadline they put in place. Developers on the team have spoken about the chaos that ensued behind the scenes. Reportedly, the game had gone through 3 different creative directors by 2021, all of whom had a different vision and idea for what the game should be. This led to tons of work having to be redone or scrapped entirely. As members of the team were constantly being laid off or moved to different projects, there was never any chance to build momentum. After half a decade of development, it seemed no one still had any idea what the game was even supposed to be. That is a fundamental failure at all levels of Ubisoft management. After a decade of chaotic development, Skull and Bones finally released in February 2024. It received poor reviews from fans and critics alike. The game bombed, struggling to hit 1 million total players even after a free trial period. Skull and Bones is just one of the many games to fall victim to Ubisoft's poor management, and with every Skull and Bones they release, consumers trust Ubisoft less and less. And that leads us into the other major problem Ubisoft is facing. They have completely lost the trust of their consumers through their various lackluster releases. And what I think is even more damaging is that Ubisoft's games are notorious for dropping in price significantly within a few months or even weeks of release. I mean, I'm talking $20 off within a couple weeks, regardless of how good or bad the game is doing. I've personally completely sworn off buying Ubisoft games day one for this very reason. Even if I'm interested in the game, and even if it's reviewing well, I know I can just wait a few weeks to get it for significantly cheaper. And it seems a lot of players have caught on to this as well. Not only can you get the game cheaper by waiting a little while, but you'll also probably be playing the best version of the game, with updates and patches making it a better experience. I think this discount method is actually a perfect representation of everything wrong with Ubisoft. They always favor short-term gains over long-term consistency. Sure, you're gonna sell more copies of your game by making it $20 less than a year after launch, but every time you do that, you're decreasing the value of the brand and making more and more people think twice about ever buying one of your games day one again. Over the last several years, Ubisoft has essentially trained gamers to not buy their games right away. Whether it's their inconsistent quality or quick discounts, very few are willing to get burned. We've seen that in real time, as basically all of their recent games seem to be having softer than expected launches, including both Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora and Star Wars Outlaws, 2 games that I bet most Ubisoft executives thought could not possibly fail. These 2 surefire hits turning into misses has sent the company into utter turmoil, all culminating into their recent press release that has many questioning the future of the once untouchable brand. On September 25th, 2024, Ubisoft announced they would be delaying Assassin's Creed Shadows until February 2025. The announcement was quite shocking, considering the game was less than 2 months away from its scheduled November release date. But Ubisoft was pretty brutally honest about why they made the decision, and a lot of it ties back to everything we've talked about so far today. First off, they directly addressed the lackluster launch of Star Wars Outlaws. I think it's pretty clear Outlaws has shaken Ubisoft to their core, and I can see why. On paper, that game should have been an easy smash hit. When working with an IP as big as Star Wars, you can pretty much do the bare minimum and still achieve a decently high level of success, but Ubisoft was seemingly unable to do so. And it appears that game was the final straw that has forced Ubisoft to look inward and rethink their strategies. They announced AC Shadows would not feature the traditional season pass we're used to, and on top of that, the game will be released on Steam day one, something Ubisoft has not done for many years. Alongside the public acknowledgement that Star Wars Outlaws had underperformed, Yves Guillemot also confirmed that Ubisoft's new live service game XDefiant is also struggling. If you're a viewer of this channel, you've seen me talk about XDefiant before. It was a game I was really looking forward to, but unfortunately was pretty disappointed by when it finally released, and it seems a lot of players felt the same way. A report came out a few weeks ago stating that XDefiant was in trouble, and if it doesn't see a turnaround by the end of Season 3, support for the game may be pulled. And for context, the game just started Season 2, so they have about 2 full seasons to get back on track. This new statement by Yves Guillemot confirmed that report to be true. The weaker than expected player numbers stings even worse, knowing that Ubisoft cancelled other projects, including The Division Heartland, in order to have those developers support XDefiant. The combination of the AC Shadows delay and the underperformance of Outlaws and XDefiant sent Ubisoft stock plummeting, with many calling for leadership change. Now, as I was writing this video, a report came out that Tencent, the mega powerful gaming conglomerate, was looking to take control of Ubisoft. The report claimed that the Guillemot family is open to the buyout, something they have vehemently refused in the past. This single report has sent stocks flying back up. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Tencent and the borderline monopoly that they've been building. But regardless of how we may feel about Tencent, this potential takeover would leave Ubisoft with the new management it desperately needs. We'll see what happens from here, but if these rumors are to be believed, Tencent will most likely become the owner of Ubisoft in the near future. To wrap this video up, I want to talk about some of the solutions I think Ubisoft can take moving forward. It appears they will be getting a new management team in the near future with the Tencent merger, and I think the first step will be addressing their workforce and productivity. Ubisoft employs over 20,000 people, which makes them one of the largest video game companies in the entire world. However, Ubisoft's game output does not reflect this whatsoever, both in terms of quality and quantity of releases. Ubisoft does put out a lot of games, but honestly not quite as many as I would expect from a company that has 40 internal teams with over 20,000 employees. At the same time, there needs to be a tighter regulation on what gets released to the public, and I think Ubisoft already realizes this from Star Wars Outlaws. Making an okay game just isn't good enough anymore, especially when that okay game features a ton of glitches and problems for your early adopters. Ubisoft needs to win the trust of gamers back by releasing quality games again. And you know what? I think they could manage to do that pretty easily. Ubisoft's dev teams are clearly talented, but so often they are trapped in a box, stuck making the games executives force on them. You can see the flashes that come through when Ubisoft lets their teams do something different, whether it's Immortals Phoenix Rising, Rainbow Six Siege, the Mario plus Rabbids games, or Prince of Persia The Lost Crown. It's clear Ubisoft's teams are capable of making great games when given the chance. Maybe it's time to focus more on experiences like that, rather than pushing for yet another Ubisoft open world game or pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into another live service game that will die out within 6 months. Ubisoft is at a crossroads, and only time will tell where they go from here. But in my opinion, if they want any hope of returning to where they once were, it's time to stop living in the past. Instead of desperately clinging to the same formula you've had for nearly 20 years now, it's time to get back to being the once innovative company that created it.